You're currently watching The Vomitorium. You can support the show at www.streamlabs.com/Vomitorium Live. Enjoy the show!
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Vomitorium Live. As always, I am your host, The Metal, here to talk about whatever floats my boat that evening. So if you happen to be watching now and or in the future, I don't care when, please find that little link in the URL bar and the share button wherever it happens to be on your device and send it out to at least one person. I don't care who. Otherwise, it's just me talking into the void, which I'm perfectly fine with. I'm content talking into the void. I'm used to it by now. And here we go. We're here to talk about some things. So the first thing that I plan on talking about today is something that I was going to talk about last time. I never got around to it. But apparently, Final Fantasy IX will, I say soon, but depends on how far into the future your parameters for soon is, will be receiving an animated series. It's something they talked about doing quite a while back. I think, what was it, in 2022 or 23, that it was supposed to get one, and it kind of just fell down into the ether. But now it's back. They're aiming for a 2028 release, and the series seems to be taking place after the events of Final Fantasy IX, following the 6 children of Vivi, which makes sense if you know anything about the series. It's going to be made by a French studio, which I believe the former product was also going to be a French studio, the one that fell under. I can't remember the name of it. I had the studio up last time, but it's hard for me to find. Where's the website I had before? Here we go. There's not a lot known about it now. Most of the information is actually in French, which I barely understand, like, anything in French at all. You could probably speak a little bit of it to me, and I could probably get the gist of what you're saying. But especially if I'm reading it, I'm like, is that even spelt the way people say it? I don't know. It's a very confusing language for anybody who wasn't, like, raised speaking French. I'm sure it makes perfect sense to the French. But where's the studio name? There's a plot summary that was leaked a while ago, and the new information we're getting kind of lines up with it. It'll be a 2D animated show, which I prefer. I'm a 2D guy. I would prefer all of my animations to always be 2D, unless you've got something like really cool planned, like you actually have a vision for your 3D. I don't think 3D is a vision now. I think it's kind of starting to become the default because it's easier just to spend all the time making the models at the beginning and then reusing them for the rest of the series. But if you actually have a cool vision with 3D, go ahead. I'll watch your 3D show or movie. But I tend to prefer 2D because 2D almost forces a vision a little bit more. Not completely, but it's a better coin flip. And obviously it'll have, like, the general runtime of 22 minutes. That's about the average for a show. They're usually somewhere between 20 to 24 minutes because you have to allow time for commercials. Maybe there'll be some variance from episode to episode, but it'll average about 22 minutes. It'll consist of 13 episodes, and they're aiming for the show to be aimed more at children from ages like 6 to 13, pre-teenager. Which makes sense if you're going to be following the young children of Vivi. Or, I guess, the French call him Bibi. I don't know if that's also how the Japanese say his name, because V's and B's are kind of just the same sound in Japanese. It might be pronounced Bibi in Japanese as well. I haven't looked at how his name is said. Sometimes I do go and I look up the different names of Final Fantasy characters. Is one of the reasons why I'm kind of disappointed with a lot of the localization with the early Final Fantasy games, because, man, sometimes they just decided straight up, this character is getting a completely different name, not even like a Anglicanization, that's a hard word to say, of their Japanese name. Which is crazy, because a lot of the Japanese names are already, like, Anglican names as it is. But, you know, what can you do? The people who were in charge of localizing things back then were who they were. Yeah, so what was it? So it was originally going to be done by Cyber Group Studios. And it now has a new set of producers. Okay, but who is it now? It should have been what you lead your article with. Because Cyber Group Studios was disclosed. Eurovisual will now be handling the animated series. Okay. That's all I need to know. So yes, Eurovisual, which I've never heard of. I think I looked them up before, like last week when I was going to be talking about this on the Friday show, and we just never got around to it. But the problem is I had a hard time finding any information about Eurovisual because their name is not very optimized for search. You type in Eurovisual and all kinds of things show up. You even type in like Eurovisual Animation Studio and any combination, and you have to go digging for a bit before you can find any information on them. It's a name that makes perfect sense. Like, I get why they have it. It's just one that's hard to actually look up. You type in Eurovisual, you start getting tons of information about like EU television programs and stations and regulations and stuff. But they will be handling the series. I wish it's very early, so we don't even have images of what the series will look like at all. What kind of style they'll be using for this 2D animation. Whether it will look a lot like the character art for Final Fantasy IX. Whether it will look like some other independent style that is local to the people working on it. Whether it'll be a little more chibi-esque, since this is supposed to be aiming for children specifically, which the Final Fantasy IX style was pretty chibi as it was, so I don't know why you'd have to adjust it too much to be able to aim a show at children. We just have this report that is confirmed, but it's little more than a leak at this point. I wonder if it will be simuldubbed when it comes out, given the fact that it is a Japanese property being made by a French studio. I don't really care at the end of the day, though. I just need somebody to sub it, whether it's official or fan subs, and I will probably eventually watch it as soon as possible. I even say eventually. I will watch it as soon as possible because I really like the old Final Fantasies, and by some regards, it depends where you place it. Some people think that Final Fantasy IX was the last good Final Fantasy. Of course, Final Fantasy X is still probably the most popularly sold one in the series, so a lot of people will think that's the last good one. The marker gets moved a lot, but 9, personally, I think was the best one on the PlayStation. And of all of the games, it's the one that probably most deserves some type of follow-up content that expands onto the world of that game, and has not. The closest thing it's ever got is the same thing everything gets, and it's like Zidane whisked away to Dissidia to participate with everyone else. No actual follow-up content for the main game itself. And I would like to see what Vivi is up to afterwards. That would be kind of fun. Don't really have too much to talk about that. Basically covered it all right there. The other thing that we're going to talk about today, we can actually thank regular viewer Fizchoso for bringing this to my attention because I did not see the teaser beforehand. There is a teaser trailer for a movie about John Madden, legendary football analyst who brought us so many things, including the heads-up display for all of the strategy in football, paths of the players, tracking all that. He's the one that innovated that field. Things would not be quite the same without him at all, which has also brought over into a lot of the things we enjoy in video games and many other fields. Like, it's cross-pollinated, and he's also just a really interesting guy. I'm not even that into football myself. I've never been a big fan of American football. I used to watch it with my dad when I was younger, but I think around the age of 12, I completely outgrew any interest in it. But I still like respect a lot of the stuff going on there, and I find a lot of the history of the sport really interesting. But I think the thing that was most interesting about it, knowing nothing about the teaser going into it, was immediately seeing Nicolas Cage wearing like the equivalent of a bodysuit or whatever. He's wearing prosthetics and everything to look as much like John Madden as possible. Which means that the movie's probably going to be great. Cage is a great actor. He's really good at getting into character. I bet he's probably studied as much footage of Madden on screen as he possibly could to be able to get the character down. And there's a bunch of other like really big actors, a lot of character actors, people who really just get into their role in the movie. So I think that'll be really fun. It was a wild trailer. If my computer were any better, we'd probably be watching it with me commentating over it right now. But I think I'll probably go watch it. It's going to be on Prime Video, which we have access to here. Oh, most people have access to Prime at this point. It's hard to not have access to it just because so many people just have Amazon Prime for the delivery purpose. It's the video service that most people have. I think if people were pulling back from most services, the two that people would continue to have would likely be Netflix, because it was the original, and everybody kind of just flocks to Netflix anyway, and Prime would be the other one. People would probably cut Hulu sooner, people would cut Disney Plus sooner, people would cut whatever other ones. I think you get Peacock for free if you just have cable, but like, who has cable these days? I mean, they would cut all the other services, and those would probably be the two people stick to. Because you're not really paying any extra for Prime unless you have an additional package to it. The movie quality looks good too. Even if I didn't care about John Madden as a guy with his history, very very interesting background, I'd probably still watch it just because of Nick Cage. Nick Cage is one of those guys where if a movie doesn't look interesting, I'd probably watch it just because Nicolas Cage is in it. He is that good of an actor that even if the movie's bad, I will still be entertained because I got to watch Nick Cage the entire time. He will bring something redeemable to that film. He definitely has to be top 10 favorite actors of all time. I remember like the Wicker Man remake that he was in. Awful film overall. I think it even destroyed the pacing of the original film it was remaking, but Cage was great in it. Some of the most memorable scenes that he's been was in that otherwise awful movie. So we're probably getting a lot of it. Probably a lot of Nick Cage memes will be brought out of that movie as well. That's what I forgot to watch. I completely forgot to watch The Family Man this year. We watched it last year, so I guess it wasn't that bad. It's not like it's been too long since I watched it, but I didn't watch The Family Man this year. That's like a Christmas must every single year. I still have time. Just because it's after Christmas doesn't mean I can't watch The Family Man. Maybe I'll go knock that out later, though I won't be able to today. Because the second we're done, you guys are lucky I even decided to stick to my own schedule. The only person who enforces the schedule on me is myself, but you're lucky I'm here because a new ZZZ update just dropped. Is on the Zone Zero, and I could be there playing that instead. That's what I'm going to be doing. Just the second it hits 11 o'clock here, which would be midnight Central, because we go by Central Time. The second that hits, I'm gone. I'm dipping. I gotta go enjoy me some Zenless Zone Zero. But maybe tomorrow or the day after, someday this week, before the new year hits, I'll probably end up watching The Family Man. Just because it feels like Christmas didn't even happen if I go a year without watching that movie. I exaggerate. I could go without watching the movie, but it's a really good one. It's Nick Cage. It's Nick Cage. He's probably the greatest actor in generations. And there's people who think I'm exaggerating there, but he's definitely one of the greatest actors. And he's a little weird at times, but that's because he wants to bring basically like vaudeville to his roles. His weirdness is what makes him so great. Because even when everybody's just like playing a normal person, playing themselves in a role, he's playing a character. Like he's getting into character and he's bringing out the best of whatever he needs to do. That man deserves all the future recognition he could possibly get. There should be a Hall of Fame that only includes like 5 to 10 people ever, and he should be in it when it comes to acting. So that'll be a fun one to enjoy. Another thing that we're going to talk about today, just a little bit. I'm not going to talk about the Endless Zero. I'll wait till I finish the patch before that, though. There's a lot of cool things. We covered that. Was it like a week or two ago? Like after the special presentation, Buck was on, and I covered everything you needed to know about that. So you could go back and watch that video. Shouldn't be that hard to find. Instead, maybe I'll even link it up. We're going to talk about Hideki Anno. Was in an interview recently where he was talking about a lot of things, but one of the bigger things was his opinion about the Japanese markets and who they should be aiming their audience for. This is a big thing that I've been complaining about for years now. Mostly when it comes to video games, they had been doing this in video games longer than their other industries. But it's been hitting manga, it's been hitting anime, it's been hitting even their movies for quite a while. Though I think film is the area that's been tainted the least in this regard. You can still get some just really, really great Japanese films that don't ever expect to leave Japan. Which gets to my point. So Anno, in the interview, stated that he doesn't believe that they should be creating for the global market. He doesn't think it's the best for the Japanese future, because let's face it, if you're going to be creating for a global market, what you're doing is, instead of functioning within a niche that could be popular, like functioning in a low competition position comparatively, now you're going to be competing against literally everything else that is aiming for a global audience, when they were already achieving a global audience, making things directly for the Japanese people first and foremost. A lot of this interview, as far as I can tell, has only been machine translated, so unless somebody else goes and we get a proper translation of it, you need to take a lot of this with a grain of salt. Even with a proper translation, you do need to take a lot of it with a grain of salt, because a lot can be lost over translation, especially intonation and intent. But one of the big things in this machine translated interview that he stated is that he's sorry, but he doesn't want the industry to adapt to the audience. He wants the audience to be the one that adapts to the industry. And I couldn't agree more. One of the main reasons I specifically watch Japanese products is because of how Japanese they are. I want a little bit of their culture in my life. They're not the only places I go for entertainment. I would say the same thing if I went to, say, French entertainment. France has a very, very long, that's a word I want to use for it. It's a very long history in its animation field, very huge breadth of content in its comic field too. They're bande dessinée, and you wouldn't want them to be any less French. As much as I make fun of the French, but honestly, the French make fun of the French. It's the most French thing to do is to make fun of the French. As much as we like to make fun of them, I really enjoy a lot of French products. The Smurfs were a French product. I love the Smurfs. I prefer when the products from France are unapologetically French. Expedition 33 came out recently is a perfect example of that, where the main starting city is literally a post-apocalyptic version of Paris, and everybody's got like classic horizontal striped shirts on. All the fashion in general is very, very French. The music sounds very French, which I love the soundtrack. But if you played that for me and I had no idea what it was from, I would immediately know a Frenchman made this, didn't he? And I want the equivalent of that from literally every place that makes content. I wanted the modern version too. Like, I don't want it to just be like historical versions of what they were. But if I wanted something from Germany, I'd want it to be unapologetically German. If I wanted something from Thailand, I'd want it to be like unapologetically Thai. Anything at all. And making things for what you perceive to be a global audience, I think is actually just hurting you. It's hurting you a lot because a lot of the global audience wants that too. There's some vocal people that are like, nah, I need you to change it for my sentimentalities. But those people don't really like your stuff anyway. They're just there because it's trendy. And they'll move on once it's no longer trendy. And this seems to be the sentiment that Ano is seeing and agrees with. He has claimed that he just never, ever considers foreigners at all when he's making his stuff. He considers that they might like it because he does have a huge fan base for his works overseas. But he doesn't consider what they might like when he makes it. He just assumes it's like, I'll make the stuff for what I think the Japanese people like, and then a bunch of foreigners will also like it if they happen to have an overlap in those tastes. And that's exactly the way it should be. I think we've been pretty weak in American media as trying to bring something as an export to the rest of the world for the last few decades. Sure, tons of people watch our stuff, but we've been watering it down. We've been sanitizing it, right? There's that whole meme of Disney and other studios trying to make movies for China just because how big China's population is. It means that there's more moviegoers there than anywhere else. But a lot of foreigners feel that same way, where if they wanted something from America, they want something that's almost unapologetically American. At least, maybe not in China. I don't know the sentiments there as much. But I know in Japan, they have a view of America that they love. You see it in all of their media. There's that meme of be the American the Japanese think you are. And there are loads of other places that feel the same way. I think we equally should be doubling down and making even more American content. Things that people associate with America too. I think we need to go back to making fun Westerns, because Westerns are very American. Even when they were made in Italy and shot for multiple places around the world, they were still recognized as being American films. And American filmmakers were very much involved in those spaghetti Westerns. And we need more historic films. We need a lot of military films are classically an American style of things too, and a lot of people love war films. And likewise, Japan has so many things that you only ever associate with Japan. Ano being one of them. He's been involved in I think he was involved in Shin Godzilla, actually, which is like, I don't know how you could get even more Japanese than Godzilla. Kaiju films are something that people are really, really into and just plant, this is Japanese. Obviously, other things with Shin, he made the Neon Genesis Evangelion series, and there's the Shin Evangelion movie and addition to it, which Shin, it's a loose translation, but you could kind of think of it as saying something like true, or like the true form of something, the realist form of something. Which is almost, when it's not your property, kind of a arrogant thing to say, but you might be right, too. He was also recently involved in... Oh, what was the name of it? It was one of the Gundams one. It was like GQ QUX or whatever. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that. There's like it's a really, really long, one of the letters just repeats a lot. Which was basically just Gundam trying to be like the old ones, but also trying to be like Evangelion at the same time. It's pretty good. It was a little too Evangelion for my taste. I'm going to hold up Anno. He's a great filmmaker and director in general, especially with animation. I'm not a big fan of Evangelion. So when I saw his Gundam series, it's like, it's totally you. I'm glad you made it. I'm glad there's a huge audience for it. This is exactly what I'm talking about, though, where the audience needs to adapt for something, right? So it may not be for me, but it's for tons of people. It's a good thing he made that series. I'll wait for the next Gundam series that's a little more like what I want out of Gundam. It'll happen eventually. Gundam's one of those series that if you like it, you're probably not going to like everything in it every time. But if you wait long enough, something you like will come back around. And it's one that's constantly always changing to the times. Right? Like, Gundam Wing was the most unapologetically 90s action series possible. Most of the episodes functioned almost like an action movie from the time. And it's great. I love Gundam Wing. But in the same way, Gundam Wing's not going to be for everyone. Like, most people don't even like the main series. It's a little too much for them. They love Endless Waltz, I think is the name of the movie. And they'll be like, it's just a shame that you have to watch the entire series of Gundam Wing to get to Endless Waltz. It's not an opinion I hold, but it's a very common opinion that people will say. Anno is not the only person in the field who's been thinking this way. We see people like Miyazaki, Hayao Miyazaki specifically from Studio Ghibli, also believes that he should stick to domestic production first, and then the overseas market stuff will follow. But I think that the big problem is not that people overseas don't want Japanese stuff. It's that in the past, they've just been really bad at selling the idea of the Japanese stuff to a lot of people. But for a lot of us who've been watching for a really long time, it is exactly what we're here for. I've been watching Japanese content, all kinds of foreign content, Chinese, French, Spanish, Mexican content. I've been watching all this worldly stuff since the 90s, since I was a little kid. I was raised on just watching whatever was available, and I was reading subtitles very early. And so people who watch all kinds of different things want particularly that. You just need to not worry about everybody else. I think that should actually be really good advice for indie creators too, no matter where you are. You could take inspiration from other things. Absolutely do. There are way too many people out there that are trying to be what they think is popular, when what they should be doing is thinking, what does their audience want, and how do I make it as me as possible? People love authenticity and sincerity. Even when you're making a product that maybe thematically is insincere, like maybe you're making parody or whatever, you still need to do it in the most authentic and sincere way. So you want to put yourself into it as much as possible. And part of that's probably going to be putting some of wherever you were raised into it too, because it's part of who you are. But it's anywhere you've spent a long enough time, right? If you move to another country and you spend 10 years there, that's going to reflect your art as well, and you should put that into it. It becomes a problem, though, when you've got executives trying to tell you to make a product that is very unlike you, just to try to appeal to what they think is the widest audience possible. Because then things become insincere, disingenuine, they become shallow, they become empty, there's no real vision behind it. A lot of the movies we see now from like the larger production studios in Hollywood are made by committee. You know, they'll shoot like 6 different movies basically, and they'll figure out which one they want, in the cutting room floor as they go in and edit and add whatever CG assets they need to into the movie. And that's just not the way artists work. Unless they're forced to. You know, like you can make them work that way, but if somebody's got a vision, that's not the way you work. You go in, you plot everything ahead of time, you kind of think like, what am I doing? Sometimes, you know, you'll change things in the process, and that's normal. There are lots of artists that do things by discovery, but it looks a lot different when you're changing things as you go along. You're not necessarily waiting for the editing room floor most of the time. Most of the time, it still happens. But a lot of the changes will happen pretty early. You'll shoot one thing, you're like, but things might be better if we do it this way instead. And instead of shooting both things, you'll just go and shoot the thing you think is better. Like, the vision will change, but you're still following a vision. And I think this is really what people like Ano are saying. We need a vision. We need to look at who our local audience is, and we need to just make things as us as possible. In his case specifically, making it very, very Japanese for Japanese people. Gintama is one of the series I think of when I think of something that is very Japanese to the point that it's not as popular overseas as it probably should be. Still pretty popular. You could go almost anywhere on forum boards or whatever, and you can find people in the West who like Gintama. But it's a much smaller proportion than you'd think it would be, especially with how popular it is in Japan. And if you're honest with yourself, you look at it, and a lot of the humor is so Japanese that if it was the first thing you've ever seen, you probably wouldn't get it. Like, you'd get it more if you were used to watching anime or reading manga or even J-dramas and other Japanese things. If you read about Japanese history, Shinto mythology, all kinds of stuff, the history of, like, kabuki theater, you see a lot of that in Gintama, all as jokes. And you'd probably just completely miss it otherwise. I think that's one of the reasons why it didn't get popular. And that is a risk that you're going to run. The more and more local a product is, the more likely things will just fly over your foreigners' heads. But that's fine, because sometimes they're just not going to stick around, or sometimes they'll be interested, and maybe on a rewatch, they'll get something they didn't the first time, as it'll be informed by everything else. And some people just need to accept, as he said, the audience is the one that needs to adapt, that you grow as an audience member by experiencing more things, and maybe you'll come back to something you didn't appreciate before, and you appreciate it more now because you grew. There's definitely a lot of things that when I first watched it, like I said, I've been watching this stuff since the 90s, late 90s. I could not probably comprehend most things in the early 90s. There were some things to watch. I was watching Godzilla movies in the earlier 90s, but most of it late 90s and on. That I did not get. I liked it. I thought the beats were great. I thought the characters were great. The action and everything. But I was a little kid. I didn't know much about the culture at all. I had to come back years, like decades later, and I understand things that I watched when I was 7 way better as an adult, knowing more about the culture. It gives you a new appreciation for something like that. Like, I think the first time I watched Spirited Away, which I think was the first Ghibli film I ever watched, I was probably 12 or 13. And it was a great movie. Loved it. Very fantastic. Had that awe that a fairy tale should have. I come back and rewatch it, I think, the second time when I was 18. And I understood it way more than the first time. I started getting a lot of references, like I understood about the culture of the bathhouse and how even the bath itself is technically a kami and all sorts of things that kind of opened my eyes and gave me a new appreciation for that film that I never had before that. And I think that's what more audience members need to do. They need to be willing to revisit things after they've grown. They need to be willing to just not totally get something the first time. There's a lot of, it's the same with your own culture. A lot of American movies that I watched growing up that I just didn't get the first time because I was a kid. Like as a kid, you don't even know that much about your own culture. You're living in it. There's things that kind of make sense to you intuitively, but you haven't even learned your own culture yet. And I've gone back and watched something like Forrest Gump. There's no way I could totally get Forrest Gump the first time I watched it as a kid. I go back as an older teenager and like, I know all those references now. Like I know each of the people he met. I know about the history of a lot of the events he passed through. I appreciate that. Watching foreign things is the same. You kind of need more life experience to get it. The animation industry in Japan is just the latest one that is starting to come to this opinion. We've seen other industries having this opinion for a while now. The video game industry has been echoing this for several years, though the echoes feel a little empty, a little hollow. They're ringing tinny in my ear. Because even though they keep saying this, they haven't exactly made enough changes. Square Enix has been one of the larger companies that have kept saying we need to reduce back, we need to focus on our Japanese studios. And recently they said that they need to be making their games more Japanese with their recent layoffs and closures of their overseas studios. Do I believe them? No, not at all. I believe when somebody like Ano says that they want to continue only focusing about the Japanese stuff at his studio, because he's always been that way. He's got that track record of not really caring what other people think aside from his closest comrades and associates. When I hear Square say, we're going to be focusing more on Japan, we're going to be focusing more on our Japanese productions, focusing more on the Japanese audience, I just don't believe them. I'm probably really cynical towards that company at this point because of how much I liked them in the past. For most of their company history, it's only been about a decade that I've been growing more of a hate relationship with Square than a love relationship. But I just don't believe them when they say that. I need to see the changes first. We're also seeing it in manga. We're seeing several of the larger magazines also saying that they need to focus on Japanese audiences first. We're seeing it not as much in the music industry, but I don't think they've ever needed to focus on outside of Japan, on foreign markets for the music industry. And I think for some reason, the music industry, wherever you are, is the one where people accept the most that things need to be local. What does that even mean for Japan, though? That's already kind of up in the air because the Japanese music scene has always been obsessed with American music for a long time. Their trends tend to be anywhere between a decade or two behind us. And they also really like the English language. You can listen to a lot of Japanese songs, and you'll probably hear some English in it because, especially if it's made by underground artists or anybody who's got a little bit of punkiness to them, English just sounds cool to the Japanese. Anytime they want to sound cool, you'll even see it in manga and anime or in live action works. If a character wants to be cool, they'll say something in English, in their overly Japanese accent, pronouncing it syllable by syllable, the way that you would probably spell it out, just because that's how they're used to saying things. But they will say things in English. Even Sonic the Hedgehog, in the first Sonic Adventure game, his opening lines were him saying things in English because it was supposed to make him look cool. So the music industry there is a completely different beast that probably just doesn't even belong in this conversation anyway because it functions on its own end completely differently. But we're also seeing it a little bit in the film industry. Not as much. It was the last one to get to this point where they were starting to make things a little bit for overseas markets. But when we're looking at how well Godzilla Minus One did, I think any of that was building up just completely dissolved. And also how well many of these animated movies are doing. Chainsaw Man did great. The, was it... what is the name of that series that I don't really like? It's not bad. I just don't really care for it. It's, they just had a movie out. Demon Slayer. That's the one I'm thinking of. It's just never appealed to me. But Demon Slayer did so well, and so did the Chainsaw Man movie. And everything that they've exported over here that's like very Japanese have done so well that I don't think the film industry is going to have issues just keeping to making things for Japanese audiences first. It's manga, anime, and video games that have been having the biggest issue here. Hey, Fizz, he says, apparently, this is actually entirely on subject, because we were talking about Japanese media. Apparently, Made in Abyss is switching to just being a movie series. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know you've been wondering for a while as to how it was going to continue. That's interesting. There have been several studios that have been thinking about prioritizing movies as their way going forward. Some of them will be juggling back and forth between actual syndicated series and film. But, again, the two that I was just talking about, with how well Chainsaw Man did, and that was one of the studios that wanted to make a movie to try to reach further audiences, and how well Demon Slayer did, there is a wider audience that you can reach if you're in theaters, both locally, because a lot of Japanese people actually still go to the movie theater, and globally. Though maybe not as much here. After you've had your initial local run, your domestic run, as they call it, it's probably best to focus on getting it onto a streaming network if you're trying to get Americans to watch your movie. Will you make less money? Yes. Maybe it depends on your property. I think both Chainsaw Man actually did really well here, and so did Demon Slayer. That they were able to get their theatrical run to work. Some smaller properties, I don't think you'll be able to make up what it cost to get it into the theaters, because enough people may not go. Less people in the United States are going to the theater than ever before. But if it's a big enough property, yeah, do your theatrical run. It'll be good for you. You'll gain all kinds of viewers that you probably wouldn't from your original series. I, for the most part, prefer long-running series. I feel like you can dive into the material more. Unless your movie is already being made of a smaller arc, something that's probably between 5 to 10 chapters that you can dedicate. You don't really want to do something that's longer than that, or else you're just going to be losing too much of the information from the material. And see, Fizz also says, plus it takes so long for the manga chapters to come out, so that's why they're switching it. That's fine. You know, if that's what they think they need to do. Though, as somebody who likes the medium of comics, it is always kind of sad to see something kind of like jump and abandon the medium altogether. Sometimes you go back. I had a big problem with Dragon Ball Super when it came out. I'm still not the biggest fan of Dragon Ball Super. Mostly, though, it is the anime. I don't really like it. And the problem was, too, is that it came out as an anime first. If it had the opportunity to be a long-running manga like the original Dragon Ball series was beforehand, they could probably flesh the ideas out a lot more between Toriyama and Toyotaro, who is the writer of it now. But Toriyama, working with a committee of writers and people working on the animation, basically had to get out week by week things that might have taken him a month to write the original story of, and he would write it as he was working on it because it would be a month's worth of manga chapters getting condensed into a single episode. Which how it was very often. There's sometimes it was one episode a chapter, depending on how dense it was. But there are some chapters, some episodes that are just like multiple chapters in one. And now he has to do that in a week-by-week TV series. And I feel like Super suffered a lot because of that. And then once Toyotaro was refleshing out the same arcs in the manga, I liked a lot of the manga arcs. A lot. Like, a ton. I thought they fixed a lot of the character issues, a lot of the pacing issues, a lot of the logic issues that ended up making a lot more sense, why people did things or how things went from point A to point B. It felt a lot more like the original Dragon Ball series. So maybe, you know, if those movies are successful, they'll reverse backwards. It happens sometimes. I don't know. That's how I like to see it. Jumping mediums is always a weird thing for any franchise. Not for adaptation. Adaptation is pretty normal. And you can continue to adapt stuff as long as you continue to have source material. But when the source material jumps mediums, there's usually a lot of whiplash that happens for almost any series. You'll usually end up with logical errors in the continuity. Not necessarily that things can't work from point A to point B. It just doesn't make as much sense as it did before to its own internal logic. Sometimes a series will even undo growth because it's trying to appeal to what it expects the audiences. This is another problem I had with Dragon Ball Super, is Goku had a lot of growth throughout the Cell Saga and then finally in the Buu Saga. Like, you see a lot of the Cell Saga growth in the Buu Saga. By the end of Buu, he's no longer like this naive kind of child that he had been even as an adult up to that point. But then when you get to Dragon Ball Super, because they're making this as a show first with the expectations of the audience that they perceive, they pretty much undid all of Goku's character development. And that's a little unfortunate. The manga did restore it a little bit. Not as much as I like, but it felt a bit more like where we left Goku off from than where the Super anime did. And because everything was so fast, I think the only episodes I ended up really liking were the ones that everybody else saw as filler. All the slice of life stuff, and specifically the Arale episode was probably the best one in the whole series. But, you know, that is what it is. I do have a little experience not jumping mediums because the source material is still going on in its original form, but adapting my own work. So I do know some of the trouble with it. X Dynamis Chaos, my personal project, started out as a web novel first, which is up on, I think the next chapter I need to do is 19 in Act 2. I'll get to it. But I also adapt the comic from it. And a lot of times when you jump mediums, not to show my own stuff, but more just to talk about experience, when you jump mediums, you need to think about what you're doing in a different way. There's some things that work better in a purely prose format. There's some things that work better once you get to a visual medium, but then there's different types of visual mediums. Is it a static visual medium like a comic? Is it an animated visual medium? Can you use the pacing of panels to imply information in between, like what's happening in the gutters? There's a lot you have to think about when you're jumping. Sometimes you do change aspects of the story. For every story that isn't X Dynamis Chaos, I'm pretty stickler on things being exactly the way they were written the first time. But because X Dynamis Chaos has a unreliable narrator, I have a lot of fun sometimes switching up events because you're not supposed to trust the author anyway. But it is a lot of trouble. It's no easy thing to work the same story into multiple mediums. So I hope that they do well with Made in Abyss there. And I also hope that their longtime fans aren't too angry at them for it if they don't perform optimally at times. Because the people who can get the angriest with you for doing anything are the fans, the people who care about something the most. They're the ones that if you're doing something wrong, they'll be the first ones to let you know. They're the first ones to defend you against other people and have your back. But they'll also be the first ones to be like, no, that shouldn't be that way. What are you doing? I don't like this. And being a fan of other people's stuff, I do, you kind of feel both ways, right? As both a creator and a consumer. Where, as a creator, as an artistic person, you kind of want to experiment, you want to jump around, you want to do a lot of different things. But you also have to think, well, how would I feel as a consumer there? Would I be happy with that person experimenting too much with that story? Or would I prefer them to just start working on a different project for the stuff they want to experiment with? And I think that's also why I personally prefer working on a bunch of different products, because I want people who already like one thing to kind of just enjoy the thing they like. I don't want to ruin it on them. I'd rather experiment off somewhere else where maybe they'll like this other thing too. There might be some overlap, but maybe, just maybe, they won't. And somebody else will be the audience for that one. Anyhow, we've made it to the end of the show. If I want to save any amount of time for closing out the schedule. Thank you guys for watching and listening to me ramble about several things that were in the news today for me, or some of it was in the news over the weekend because we don't do a show over the weekend, and the beginning of the week might end up being catch-up days sometimes. But I enjoyed it. I will see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place. I don't know if I'll do an earlier stream. Maybe I will. Who knows what I'll do. But definitely tomorrow here, the Vomitorium Live at 11 p.m. Central Time. And I'm going to go run off and play the new Zenless Zone Zero patch. So you guys take it easy. Also, new chair. Enjoy my chair. I'm no longer sitting on a dining room chair. Bye.